Hey, what is going on, everybody? Hope you guys had a wonderful Friday. Weekend time, right? You guys gonna spend it holiday shopping? And I know it feels weird asking rhetorical questions, but hey, that's what I pretty much can gather that a lot of people are gonna be doing because it's creeping up on us. What's today? The ninth? Yeah. No wonder why the traffic has been much more busy going in certain directions. Even though we have a ton of different places scattered around, it just seems everywhere you go, there's traffic, traffic, traffic. Colorado is just booming. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy the holidays, love the holidays, and are spending it with loved ones. And for those of you who aren't, just know that there's someone out there that's always thinking about you. I'm not real big on the holidays because of my custody with my daughter. So a lot of the times when I go to families' houses, I see, all these little kids, and it really did get to me. Yeah, you could totally tell there was a pause there. Wasn't back in the same position, all that stuff. Just getting, I swear, I do a lot of stuff on Marketplace. When my stepfather passed away, he had quite a bit of antiques, knickknacks, things like that. Some people came in and bought things for like their railroad sets. Other people came in and bought freaking old tools that were made like in the 20s. It actually found, and they actually have a museum for these toys. What had happened was during World War One and Two, the government was selective on how they were going to start using their metal for, ammunition, probably building aircraft carriers, boats, you name it. For whatever reason, there was pretty much a metal shortage, and so this company, it was called Dent, Dent, and they made a lot of, I guess, like maybe knickknacks or something you would call it. I don't know, like toys, things of that nature. And when the owner received word that they had to go down and, they had to stop manufacturing, cast iron toys, the owner made a shitload of them, put them in a box, and everybody just kind of forgot about it. And it wasn't until like maybe, I don't know, 50 years later or something, the family still had the manufacturing company under their name. The building was falling in disarray, and they went upstairs and they're looking around. And they find like four huge crates. They open it up, and it's all these Dent toys. And they pretty much belong in museums. There's really no price tag you could put on them. During my time on eBay, because I used to eBay a shitload, when I got that payback from my Psycho X for opening up 20 credit cards under my name, um, I just went wild and started buying like comic books that were $8,000, freaking Sonos, I'm an audio maniac. I mean, anything that sounds good is like, I just go all out. So I had this particular room, which now is more like an art studio. It's like I have black paint all over the walls. I don't even know how I would have gotten, unless my daughter came in and started just messing with the brushes and painting the walls black. I have green paint and red paint, you name it. So it's just like my little studio. But man, I back to that dent thing when I had found those when I was going through everything. I was like, holy shit. So I checked on eBay, and I had all these haters, but one of them, that was his specialty. He was looking for dent toys. And he's like, if you ever see like a, what is it? The road show auction, or not auction, but what the hell is it called? Where people take their stuff in and want to find out if there's value to it. You have those people there who will tell you, oh, yeah, this is actually blah, blah, blah. Well, they would be worth a ton. And so I'm still sitting on them. Uh, and I'm going to wait until I get a chance to take it to those places to, you know, um, verify its authenticity, because my stepfather would just buy, kind of like me, just buy anything that he saw his hands on. Except I didn't have like seven cars in one garage. It's the size of a freaking house. but yeah, he had him on dollies, the cars, and so he would move them around and position them just right, and still have room to do a lot in his garage. And so he was just good with money. It's not like he was a CEO or a freaking, he just was a hardworking guy. I remember first time I met him. I remember like I was a little kid, like 12 or so, and he was working at Taco Bell, and I'm like, even I didn't think that was cool back then. I'm like, he works at Taco Bell, and my mom's like, oh no, he just, one of those guys that likes to stay busy. So, there's no shame in where people work whatsoever. I don't ever dog anybody for what they do. You know, if it's a hard, honest, living, good for them. I really do appreciate that in people. It bothers me when, people are so judgmental of others. Like, oh my God, you work at a McDonald's or a Taco Bell. Like, shit. And it's a good, honest wage. Doesn't mean you don't know that person's life story. You don't know, shit, how much money they have saved away, or if they're just doing this to kill time because they're bored, and that's basically what my stepdad was doing. Then he'd find another project. He'd quit Taco Bell and then start doing another project, go on to the next, go on to the next. And so, yeah, these toys are, yeah, they're very valuable. So I got to find out what the deal is on them. Otherwise, my week has been pretty busy. I wasn't expecting a lot of what I did this weekend to take so long, but then again, I got to realize that things aren't always going to run smoothly. And then I hope, like in edit and post production, it's like I hope you keep in there everything that we did, but that's not always the case either. So hopefully everything will work out fine. Other than that, man, I'm happy. I'm alive. I love this time of year. I love seeing smile on people's faces. So, we got that going. I also love true crime stories like you guys. So a subscriber of mine, had told me about this guy. And so I was like, okay, I'll give it a look. See, one of the few, YouTubers, I'm sure there's a lot of them, but me personally, for what I've seen, I would say him and Nick Crowley are probably two of them that do true crime and these weird stories. But he very low budget, no high, what would you call it, production value. Just like, hey, I'm here in my room, just like me, I'm here in my studio, and just doing my thing. And he has 2 million followers. I think that's awesome. So, like I keep on telling you all, I am revamping everything come March, hopefully, and maybe even sooner. But, I absolutely appreciate each and every one of you that subscribe to me. I think that's awesome. I don't say it every video, but I do appreciate it. For anyone who's new to the channel, if you're up to it, if the content's up your alley, it's a reaction channel, giving my opinions. You're more than welcome to subscribe. If not, no hard feelings. If you want to leave a dislike or a like, tell me what you think I could be doing differently, and I certainly would. Do take constructive criticism. So for now, let's go ahead and jump into this user who, this really kind of is up my alley and up a lot of people's alleys. If you like, that chapter or true crime stuff, I really like how he presented this. So it's not going to be a raw reaction. It's going to be, because I was listening to it in the car, I was like, wow, it popped up out of nowhere. And so, yeah, it caught my attention right away. I've seen half of it. So it's an hour long. I'll probably cut it in half because the second half will then be, genuine. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. So here we go. So it's another iceberg video, and I've done quite a few of them, but this one is kind of different, and I can't explain how, but it is much different. So without further ado, here we go. Did I even, I know I did. Yep. I thought, did I even, unpause it? But here we go.
Hello everybody and welcome to the True Crime Unsolved Iceberg. As the title suggests, this is going to be a look at atrocities and crimes committed by people who to this day have not been caught. The chart goes from everything from well-known unsolved cases all the way down to discovered victims and remains who are hard to explain, let alone catch who did it. I will not be showing any of the more brutal crime scene imagery, but I will be discussing some more intense topics, especially as the iceberg goes down, so viewer discretion advised. I would also like to thank Reddit user Washer Masu, at least I think that's how it's pronounced, who made this iceberg and was a big help to me in figuring out some of the ones that I didn't even know about and couldn't find information on initially. As he said, the chart is ranked by obscurity and a little bit of depravity. That being said, timestamps for every tier will be in the description, so if you're getting bored or don't like whatever's being mentioned on one tier, skip ahead to the next to see if you like that better. Also, I'm going to link the original iceberg image in the description. I'll have it posted on my Patreon, but you'll notice that I omitted a few of them from this video. The reason being the original iceberg was just unsolved mysteries in general, so a few had to do with the supernatural and things similar, and I'd rather just stick to the true crime aspect.
You know, one thing I dislike off the bat here, and I'm going to tell you, this is my true opinion. There is a good saying that said, being 100% skeptic isn't being open to anything. Who would have thought before Einstein came up with this theory of relativity, when people thought none of what he had postulated was possible? Now all of a sudden it's proving people wrong, scientists wrong, from back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And it wasn't up until more recently when the technology caught up with, his theories that we are able to see like, wow, he was right. Same with Nikola Tesla. You would easily be, I'm not saying everyone, but there would be a large majority of people who would easily say like, oh yeah, that's crazy. That, I'm not even going to pay attention to that. So people who automatically come off the bat, because, he must believe in some way, because he has this Wendigo, which is a mythological creature, that's able to mimic people's voices that and then just shred you apart, supposedly. So I've never seen one or seen videos of one, but he obviously has that, so anything supernatural that he cut out, I'm kind of disappointed with. Anyway, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
Especially since a lot of those supernatural ones I cover in the conspiracy series, or at least I felt like I should remove them by my opinion for this video, because the thing about opinions, everyone's got one. And speaking of opinions, how would you like to get paid for yours? I'm going to tell you how with the sponsor of today's video, Opinion Outpost. Now I'll be we'll get points that start earning. Back to the video. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. I have come down with a horrible cold of some kind and am on an absurd amount of Alka-Seltzer and NyQuil currently, so this is going to be fun. We're kicking it off with Tier 1, but as always, thank you for watching. Jack the Ripper is confirmed to have 5 victims, although some believe he may have had more. He mostly preyed on people in the impoverished Whitechapel district of London in 1888. While no one knows exactly who Jack the Ripper was, there were several letters sent from him to the police sort of teasing his arrest. All of the victims were prostitutes, which have led some to theorize that possibly it was a morality or for God killing, while others have argued a misogyny-based motive. However, my personal theory is that speculation of police officers at the time believed the women that were killed had previously worked for high-ranking government officials, meaning Jack the Ripper, or either a group of people calling themselves Jack the Ripper, could have been acting as a sort of red right hand of these government officials. This is supported by some things, such as 3 of the victims having their organs removed, which some believe mean he was taking the organs for himself, or others believe that possibly these women were pregnant, and this was a means of preventing an unwanted child from a government official. And considering that he knew the police routes and knew exactly how to obscure evidence in a way the police cannot trace him, I, as well as many others, believe that maybe Jack the Ripper was a cop. The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer who attacked Northern California from the late 60s to early 70s. Having 5 known victims with the attempt of more, the Zodiac Killer attacked couples who seemed to be on dates or sort of lovers' lane locations. He was famous, and the name came from cryptograms he would send the local press as a means of taunting them to his whereabouts, even claiming that in one of the ciphers was his real name, although that cipher has never been solved. People were so desperate to figure out who the Zodiac Killer was that they began saying that maybe it's Ted Kaczynski and just pinning it on other popular crimes of the time. Although Robert Graysmith's book led many to believe it was a man by the name of Arthur Lee Allen, considering he was one of the initial people interviewed as a possible suspect, although the police couldn't pin him for anything. And while a lot of the evidence proved to be circumstantial, the fact that the killing stopped immediately after Arthur Lee Allen died, along with a few other things, leads several to believe that perhaps he was the Zodiac Killer. The murder of the Grimes sisters was a double murder that took place in Chicago on the night of December 28, 1956. Barbara and Patricia Grimes were on their way back from the local movie theater when they went missing. Being only 15 and 12 years old, it sparked the largest search in Cook County history. During this time, 300,000 people were questioned by the Chicago police and 2,000 were interrogated. There were also several weird sightings people reported, such as seeing them get on and off a bus in a town several miles away, or seeing them eating at the local diner as if nothing was wrong. However, when you ask around 300,000 people, there's probably going to be some missed sightings. Sadly, on January 22nd, their bodies were found by a road just outside of Chicago, where the coroner report later said that they had been dead roughly a month. No one was ever officially caught or tried for the murder of these girls, and it remains to many as one of the more odd cases, considering...
I've heard of this one several times, actually, from Scary News. Their bodies were just solid, frozen solid, that they had to let them thaw out for like days. I don't know how many days. And I know that kind of sounds graphic or gruesome, and I'm sorry, I should have said, an advisory ahead. But it's just a sad story, because the man that they believed who did it all of a sudden was walking in one direction, and once he seen these two young ladies get on the bus to go see a movie, he suddenly turned back around and hailed the driver and got on, and then they get off and voila, they went missing. I don't know if they ever got the name of the man or interrogated him, but by all means, it doesn't seem like that ever happened.
During the number of people that were looking for them, and several cite it as the day Chicago lost its innocence. I had no idea about this before doing research for this video, but there is a very popular theory that James Earl Ray did not kill Martin Luther King Jr. So much so that the King family filed a civil suit against the state saying that they had the wrong man. Up to the point that Martin's son Dexter King was visiting James Earl Ray nearly weekly in prison, talking to him about how they need to get him out. It got to such a point that they put together a committee, also known as the House Select Committee on Assassinations, to determine if MLK was killed by James Earl Ray. Which also on that committee, they ruled the JFK shooting, and you know how I feel about that one. It'd be no secret that the government hated Martin Luther King, doing everything from denying his concealed carry permit to writing him letters in an attempt to make him kill himself. Several believe that perhaps James Earl Ray was just part of a greater conspiracy, and I went down such a rabbit hole with this there will probably be a deeper dive, so stay tuned. Bob Crane was a famous actor from the show Hogan's Heroes. However, unlike the wholesome television show he was on, when he was not on set, he was doing a whole lot of... yeah. As a matter of fact, he greatly enjoyed filming these events, sometimes without the consent of the women themselves, with the help of his partner John Henry Carpenter. That was until June 29th of 1978 when Victoria Berry, his co-star, came to see him as he had not come to work that day, only to find him bludgeoned to death on the ground with a phone cord wrapped around his neck. Immediately, attention turned towards John Henry Carpenter. According to Bob's son, the night before his dad was murdered, John was in a fight with Bob over the phone, as Bob had said that John had gotten weird and a little too clingy, and he was trying to break off their friendship. This led to an investigation of John where nothing conclusive was turned up, although a lot of people to this day thinks he probably did it. Because they impounded his car and they found blood and supposedly brain matter in the back seat, but they couldn't test the DNA right because it was 1978, so it wasn't conclusive. But I mean, if you found the brain matter in the blood and then his best friend's dead the next day, probably. This one, I mean, I know it's technically unsolved, but, is it really unsolved? Come on, guys, really? What is known for sure is that Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman were murdered on June the 12th of 1994. Attention immediately turned towards Nicole's husband, O.J. Simpson, who was a popular football player who was fleeing the scene at the time this was going down. This led to the famous chase down the LA freeway in his white Ford Bronco. This then led to an 11-month trial, which many have called the trial of the century for its widespread publication. Despite evidence so far as O.J. Simpson's DNA being on the inside of a glove left at the crime scene that had Nicole Simpson's blood on the outside of it.
Guys, let me know if you change your opinion on it, if you were ever for or against, thinking that he did it or did not do it. I know they show in the docuseries that they did on FX how Kardashian, one of his closest friends, ended up more or less believing that he was the one who did it. But then you had somebody like Mark Furman, the detective, who was known to be, a racist, who had, all this Nazi paraphernalia and all that, who essentially pled the fifth on every single charge. And I told you there was one time I had went to court for a speeding ticket, and the people ahead of me, I don't know what their thing was, but I remember so vividly the judge saying, if either one of you plead the fifth, I will take that as a guilty plea. And I'm like, mind you, I have no horse in this race, but I thought, like, that is your given right to plead the fifth. And I think doing that made people suspicious of, like, that Mark Furman of being, racist and planting evidence because, he pled the fifth on everything. So I don't know. It really still, like, I'm still 50-50 on it. I know his actions afterwards have shown, I mean, just because you do one, messed up thing doesn't mean you did another fucked up thing. But either way, I wish they would have, if he was the one who did it, I wish they would have found conclusive evidence. I mean, they were going up against a hell of a group of great lawyers. So, yeah, I just don't know to this day.
Scene that had Nicole Simpson's blood on the outside of it. OJ's lawyer managed to make it a race issue, saying that the LA police were staging OJ to take the fall for someone else's crime, which led to a not guilty verdict for OJ, and no other suspects have been named since because, yeah. Tupac, who is a famous rapper and actor, was murdered on September 7th of 1996 in Las Vegas.
Okay, I don't care if you guys hate me on this. I mean, I love my subscribers. I love everyone who watches my videos, but the most overrated rapper ever and the biggest poser ever is this man right here, Tupac. If you guys want to know why I think that, feel free to say in the comments, why do you think that? He died a little bit before I got into the music industry, and mind you, I wasn't the biggest on hip-hop. Loved The Chronic by Dr. Dre, loved Doggy Style by Snoop Dogg, but yeah, you climb into a certain category when you're young and you're coming up and you have songs that people love and people just think, he was a genius at this, at that. I mean, you can't be gangster if you're attending Juilliard, and you have to have some serious effing talent to attend Juilliard. He attended Juilliard. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But you've seen the same thing happen with Juice WRLD. Once all of a sudden you start being surrounded by these quote-unquote gangsters, then all of a sudden, you start becoming yourself like this wannabe gangster. It's not a good recipe for, for your life, for what you're doing, for what you're promoting and putting out there. You're always, no matter where you are in life, if you're, broke, if you're right above that curve, being middle class or, being the 1%, someone's always going to dislike you in some way or another. And there were a lot of haters on him. Me hating him I didn't hate him. Hate is a strong word. But obviously he was hated enough by somebody to get killed and for them to have killed him. I hate the fact that Suge Knight never said anything and that he has pretty much, I'm just shocked that they let him go, because usually when something like that happens, they grill, somebody that was in the car with them at that time when things like this happen. I had my back windows shot out while me and my friend were driving because I used to have a car that had, two 15-inch subwoofers. I was into that scene, and all of a sudden I started feeling glass, and my friend's like, "We're getting effing shot at, man." So I pulled over, into the 7-Eleven and called the cops, and the cops said, "Yeah, we've been having a string of these guys getting initiated, and they're going around shooting at cars." And it would have been my friend sitting on the passenger side because that's where it came from, and they found the bullets in my subwoofer box. So it didn't affect it, but that was the least of my concern because somebody was actually going out there shooting at people. But again, when you try to be something that you're not, or way that you were raised, has nothing to do with the, what you're doing and promoting. It's not a good, you're going to be surrounded by yes men. And I've seen it too many times. You have to have somebody to put your ass in check. And I think the only one that was able to do that was Suge Knight, because Suge Knight owned Death Row. Tupac also knew how much he was, valued by Death Row, because he used to be an East Coast rapper with Biggie. Him and Biggie were, homies. And then he blamed Biggie for all the freaking times he had gotten shot at the recording studio, and then, got shot again and blamed Biggie for it. And even Snoop Dogg said it himself. He's like, we later found out that the people who were responsible for it weren't the people that we went after. And I mean, it's just you live that pretend lifestyle, and it's gonna catch up to you, man.
At 11:15, his car was stopped at a stoplight, to which a four-door Suburban pulled up next to them, to which the driver then rolled down the window and shot into Tupac's car. Tupac survived for 6 days in the hospital before passing away. The only real single suspect that's been named in the case is a man named Orlando Anderson, who was a Crip that Tupac had gotten into with a fight earlier that night because Orlando had supposedly stolen jewelry from one of Tupac's groupies at an earlier date. However, no conclusive evidence stuck, and Tupac's death is remembered to this day as one of the most tragic of the music industry. Closely related is the death of the notorious B.I.G. The rapper, also known as Biggie, was killed on March the 9th of 1997 in L.A. In a very similar circumstance, at nearly 1 in the morning, while sitting in his car, a Chevy Impala drove up next to B.I.G.'s vehicle and fired out the window into his. Biggie was hit 4 times and died that night of his injuries in a hospital. With his death occurring only 6 months after Tupac's, many relate this to being part of a larger world of a rapper turf war. Now, Elisa Lam's pretty popular now, thanks in no small part to the Netflix documentary, which showcased the most probable reason for her disappearance. However, for those of you who don't know, on February 19th of 2013, Elisa Lam was seen on the security camera of the Cecil Hotel freaking out at seemingly nothing. On the security tapes, you can see her peeking in and out of an elevator, seeming freaked out as if someone's following her, before she runs off and isn't seen alive ever again. 3 days later, she was found in the water tank on the roof of the hotel. While now the common theory is that she was off of her medication and was suffering a sort of delusional mental episode, it doesn't explain all the pieces like how she got to the roof, how she got inside of the water tower, and if anyone else was involved.
Okay, so here's my take on this. You know what is weird is that during the whole time she gets in the elevator, she pushes a button to go down, the door doesn't close. So then she sticks her head out, starts peeking around. If you guys haven't seen the video, it's crazy. Like if she's seeing something that isn't there. But as soon as she walks out of view of camera, the door closes immediately. The elevator did not have, or nobody reported the elevator having problems of once they pushed the floor. You had about maybe a 6-second delay before the doors would start closing. She pushed her floor, it didn't close, and then she started pushing all the buttons that she could. And that's not going to throw off the timing of the door closing. But when she walks away, it closes 6 seconds later. So that was a strange thing. Like, there's nothing breaking that barrier that's going to stop, that should stop the elevator from closing. So it was just really weird to me, that aspect of it. But yeah, onto this one. This one's also this one's crazy.
Volta Pass incident occurred in 1959 when in the month of February 9 bodies were found in Russia. What had happened was this group of researchers had gone out in order to do forward observations of this sort of tundra area within Russia. After not reporting back for 2 weeks, a rescue crew went out to locate them, which when they found them, all 9 of them were in very different states of bodily disarray. They suffered everything from extreme chest trauma, like every single rib being broken, skull damage, having their eyes and tongues removed, as well as being punctured into a tree. This has led to a near infinite amount of theories, which has been covered with people much more qualified than I am. With the modern theory being that maybe a giant avalanche came in and threw them all into these different forms of injury that ended up killing them, to which the things like the tongues and eye being removed are the effects of wildlife in the area. Either way, their official cause of death to this day is written down as an overwhelming, compelling force, which could mean literally anything. Which, I mean, we all know it was giants, like they got too close to the gateway to the Middle Earth, so the giants had to come up and, teach him a lesson. The Black Dahlia murder case refers to Elizabeth Short, who was found murdered on January the 15th of 1947. Elizabeth Short had gone to LA in order to star in movies, however, tragically that never came to fruition as she was found dead. The coroner report places her time of death as 5 days earlier than when she was discovered, in the middle of an empty lot in downtown LA. What's especially interesting about this case is the way that the press handled it. Like, I understand it was 1947, but oh my word. Like, for example, whenever they found her body, she was naked and she was purposefully posed in a depraving manner. The press jumped on this opportunity, saying that she was a prostitute and a call girl and making it like a very naughty case. Like, to give you an idea, whenever they got the name Elizabeth Short, they called her mom, who was in New York, and told her that her daughter had won a beauty contest and that they needed to take some information. So after recording all the information, they asked the mom, they then go, actually, this is the newspaper, your daughter's dead. Click. Like, oh my gosh. I know, like, no one cared about that kind of thing in 1947, but was everyone a monster? Even the name Black Dahlia comes from an old Hollywood movie known as Blue Dahlia, further adding to the whole mysticism of this sexy murder victim. All in all, during the case, 500 people confessed to the murder as a means of getting popular. It even got to the point that it became a sort of dare among young guys to go confess to the police that you murdered the Black Dahlia, with one officer who worked the case remarking the unbelievable amount of people who went to the police confessing that it was their in-laws who murdered her. Sadly, the true murderer has never been found, but at least in recent years, Elizabeth has been given some of the respect that she deserved back. We are now on to Tier 2. Art heist at the Garter Museum occurred on March the 18th of 1990. In it, at this Boston museum, nearly $500 million worth of artwork was stolen in one night. What happened is during the night shift,
This is the perfect crime.
2 of the security guards let in 2 men who were dressed as police who said they were responding to a disturbance. These 2 men dressed as police then overwhelmed the guards and tied them up in the basement while they went around stealing artwork off the walls. They were in and out in 81 minutes and took 13 pieces of art from behind displays. Also, before they left, they went to the guards that they had tied up in the basement, asked if they were comfortable and they needed to get them anything before leaving. The leading theory is that the men were part of the Boston Mafia, and that's part of the reason they were so well connected as having never been found afterwards, despite their sketches appearing all over Boston shortly afterwards. And other than a letter that came in a few months later saying they wanted to delegate a return of the art with the museum, to which the author of the letter never responded again, no other leads have been made in the case. JonBenet Ramsey was a 6-year-old beauty pageant star who...
Okay, I'm still on board for this because the brother, I had talked about this several months ago. Like, why the fuck is this still unsolved? Now, I'm sorry if you guys don't like what I have to say. Just my opinion. If this was a multiracial family, anything but Caucasian, and they were just as wealthy as the Ramseys, I don't think they would have gotten off so easily. And I know the Ramseys didn't get off so easily. I mean, for Christ's sake, it killed their mother. I don't think, in my opinion, that the mother had any idea what happened to her child. Now, as for the father goes, I don't think he was a part of this whatsoever. I don't know if maybe it was the brother who was a minor at the time. And it certainly doesn't appear that, the note was written by a minor, but it's just, I don't know, one of those weird cases that I wish that they resolved. And what a lot of people do not recall, because it wasn't news, a little bit after she was killed, there was a man. I have family in this little town called Platteville, Colorado. It's starting to grow quite a bit, but there's two gas stations right next door to one another. And at the time, there wasn't. The lot was just vacant on the southern end, but then there was a Circle K. And on that night that this happened, it isn't too far away from this town, Platteville. And you could drive a lot of back roads and all that, going fast and get away with it. It's just cornfields everywhere you look. And this guy shot and killed the Circle K employee and fled, and they never caught him either. So I always wondered, I wonder if this has anything to do with what happened to her, but who knows?
Who was murdered Christmas morning of 1996. The short version is JonBenét's parents woke up on Christmas morning, not able to find their daughter, with a ransom note located on the kitchen counter. They then called the police, who came over and began setting up the proper way to go about paying the ransom money. However, the other party never showed up to take the ransom that day, and 7 hours after the initial police call and ransom note was found, one of the officers discovered JonBenét's body in the basement. She had been strangled and hidden down there as a means for the family to not find her. That's when a lot of the details start to get kind of weird. For example, the ransom note that was found was nearly 2.5 pages long, and the materials it was made out of suggests that whoever wrote it within the house. Then inside of the ransom note, the amount of money that was asked for was almost exactly what the husband had received as a work bonus that year. On top of that, the officer later noted, whenever being asked to recollect about the case, whenever he went down to the basement door, it was locked from the outside, meaning that whoever did lock it would have to have a key to the room. This all implies that whoever killed JonBenet was either very closely related or at least had people closely related to the family themselves. This argument got to such a point in the investigation that followed that police officers got into almost screaming matches with the family, accusing them of being part of the greater conspiracy. And this is a cool one to look into. I suggest you do it. I'm not going to say anything on YouTube because in researching this, I found out that the Ramsey family like to sue people for allegations and stuff. I'm not saying anything, I'm simply postulating. So we're moving on to the next one. The Icebox murders were discovered on June 23rd of 1965. This happened when Marvin Martin called the Houston police saying that he hadn't heard from his aunt and uncle in a while. Fred and Edwina Roger were an elderly couple and he was worried about their well-being. When the police got to the household, everything seemed fine until one of the officers went and checked the fridge. They opened it up and saw several pieces of what appeared to be cut beef laying open in the fridge. Before shutting the door, he looked down in the ice tray and saw two heads and realized that was not beef he was looking at. It was the Rogers. The chief and only suspect of the case was their son, Charles Rogers, who lived with the couple, however, was never seen again after these murders. Charles was always known as a sort of recluse who didn't really interact with anyone as a part of the community around him. The only blood that was found in the house was in the upstairs bathroom where it seemed the cuts had taken place, and a few drops of blood that led into Charles' room. However, and this is where it gets weird, so Charles was always seen leaving his house very early in the morning and coming back very late at night, but those who did know him say he always had a lot of money despite not having a job. Supposedly, people close to Charles have said that he worked with the government in a very secretive manner. Not only that, but Charles had been working a very successful IT job which he quit shortly before moving back in with his parents. This has led many to believe that Charles was a CIA agent. And not only that, people have placed Charles in Dallas, Texas on the day of the Kennedy assassination, which means many people think that Charles helped assassinate John F. Kennedy as part of the Kennedy conspiracy. So, following that train of logic...
Hey, I don't know why you're laughing, man, because that's a conspiracy in itself. For those of you who are hunters, like to shoot, go to the gun range, or you have your own, range where you like to, shoot your guns. The moment that a bullet impacts anything, that bullet is unrecognizable unless it were made of steel. And even then, you will have like abrasion marks. You will have, some marks. It obviously still is much stronger than copper. And when they find this quote unquote magic bullet, it honestly looks like somebody just pulled it out of the box. Now, if that bullet, and viewer discretion here, was capable of, and we've all seen the Zapruder film where, the moment he gets shot, the first shot, hits him in the neck and hits the governor of Texas, like in the side. And then the second shot, about 5 seconds later, you just see his skull, explode. If that bullet were used in that moment, for that assassination attempt, there is absolutely no way it would, come about so pristine. Like if it was just pulled from the rifle. I mean, it was in perfect condition. And that is impossible, especially hitting a human skull. Impossible. So this forever, I think, will remain a mystery for the JFK assassinations.
Perhaps his parents were getting a little too close to figuring out what he was doing, and either him or the organization he was a part of had to silence them. Although that still doesn't explain why they were like made into hot dog packets in the fridge, but I don't know, maybe to add some pizzazz because they were bored. I don't know. Who is B.D. Cooper refers to the only unsolved hijacking to ever occur in American aviation history. On November 24th of 1971, a Boeing 727 was flying between Portland and Seattle when a stewardess was handed a note from a man sitting down that said he had a bomb. She asked to see it. He popped open his briefcase and she saw something that she later described looked like a bomb, to which he then negotiated through the stewardess with the captain of the plane of what to do next. He had the captain land the plane early and get everyone off board who is not an essential flight operator. Once landed, he demanded several $1,000,000 in a briefcase. Also, in the meantime, everyone who interacted with him said he was incredibly kind, that he was very nice, slow-talking, understanding, and even talked to the stewardess about how everything's going to be okay and how she was such a bright young woman with a beautiful future. He also knew a lot about planes, having them negotiate for enough gas that he knew he would need to get to his next destination, as well as what crew were needed to continue operation and what parts of the plane could be disengaged from others. The plan, he told them, was to fly the plane to Mexico, but while they were on the way and in the air, he told everyone to get into the cockpit of the plane and seal themselves in. While they were in there, they saw that the rear door of the plane opened, which, mind you, D.B. Cooper had said before takeoff, do not pressurize the cabin of the plane because this was his plan. They asked him from the cockpit if he needed any help. He said that he was good, to have a great day, and then they never heard from him again. Also, whenever leaving the cabin after landing, they saw the parachute was missing, which he had also demanded for in the ransom earlier. Meaning this guy had everyone go into the cockpit. He then opened the back door, strapped the money to himself, strapped on a parachute, and jumped, and he has never been found since. A massive manhunt happened in the region that he jumped from trying to locate him, but none ever did. D.B. Cooper was, of course, proven to be an alias and not his real name, and it has been cited by many to be one of the most elaborate and possibly the most elaborate aerial heist to ever take.
So did they not keep records of who bought tickets at, and around that time and go and like cross-examine, okay, this is a sketch, let's go try this, fellow that, it doesn't sound to me as if the plane was full. And as many times as I heard the story, it's never once sounded like the plane was full. So somebody, of course, used an alias, which, then I guess in turn is going to leave the wrong address. But with resources and everything, and I'm pretty sure they printed this out for the public to see, nobody came forward. So I guess, I'm thinking in my head here that's my bad. Like, well, shit, if he used an alias, why wouldn't he use a fake address? It just hit me now, so my bad.
Place. Asha Degree was a very odd disappearance that occurred on Valentine's Day of 2000. 9-year-old Asha, who lived in Shelby, North Carolina, was, by all accounts, just a standard happy kid. However, for some reason that no one knows to this day, At 4 a.m. on Valentine's Day, she filled up a backpack with her clothes and walked out in the middle of a thunderstorm and began walking down Highway 18. A car that was driving by noticed her and thought it was weird that a kid's walking in the middle of the thunderstorm on the side of the highway. And upon getting out to go talk to her, she ran into the woods and has never been seen since. Normally with a story like this, I would say, well, maybe something bad was happening at home, or maybe she was being tricked by some adult around her, something like that. But in all the research I've done, a bunch of kids would always stay at Ash's house. Her other siblings are perfectly fine. The parents seem entirely caring, and there's no signs that it was something at home that was doing it. And then on the other end, her parents were very careful with who they allowed Asha to talk to, and it wasn't like she was on some online chat room talking to some stranger because there wasn't even a computer in the home and they don't know where she could have got access to one. The family placed a billboard of Asha at the spot she ran into the woods at, and every year on Valentine's Day they hold a march to the billboard as a means of raising awareness for the case. A year and a half later, her backpack was found wrapped in a plastic bag at a construction site, but other than that, there's been no new developments in the case. Police have said that in November of 2020, there was a new lead they were following, so hopefully something comes from that. This one's especially bizarre, as not only is there no answer, but there's seemingly not even a rhyme or reason to why any of this occurred in the first place. The Smiley Face murders is a theory that between the 1990s and 2010s, several accidents in which men fell into the water and drowned weren't accidents at all. The theory was made by retired detectives who, after reviewing case files for a long time in their career, discovered that there was an odd occurrence that happened between supposedly drunk college-age athletic men who went to a lake and drowned in an accident, and smiley face graffiti located nearby. Now, this is right on the border of like causation and correlation, because graffiti's always going to exist at public spots near lakes. It's just a thing that people do for some reason. And a smiley face has got to be the most simple thing in the world to draw, so it's probably the most common type of graffiti, if not one of them. But in their research, 45 men who all match the same sort of style, specifically their way of life and their ethnicity as being white and in college. But supposedly a connection exists between specifically 45 men across 11 different states who were all white college-age guys who had drowning accidents. This is a weird one. If it was one connected killer, then it would be dozens of killings that took place over the course of 30 years for a motive that we don't even know how to speculate on yet, or they could just be accidents. Who knows? The kidnapping and killing of Amber Hagerman occurred on January the 13th of 1996. 9-year-old Amber was playing on a bicycle with her 5-year-old brother Ricky in an abandoned parking lot in Arlington, Texas. Basically, there was an old grocery store that shut down in the middle of their sort of residential area that the kids would play around on their bicycles and hop on a ramp and whatever. Ricky had biked home shortly before a neighbor saw what he said was a black pickup truck pull up, open up the door, grab Amber off of her bicycle, throw her into the car while she was screaming, and drive away. This sparked a big manhunt, as you can imagine, to locate Amber. However, sadly, 4 days later, her body was found roughly 5 miles away. To make it even more tragic, the coroner's report had said that she had lived for 2 days of that ordeal and was abused in various ways. This sparked a huge outrage in the local community, who said it was ridiculous that this had occurred so close to them, and the fact that the body was found relatively nearby, that if other people around had just known what to be on the lookout for or what truck to look for, maybe Amber could have been saved. This led to the invention of the Amber Alert system, with the idea being that maybe if people locally had just known to look out for this black pickup truck, then maybe Amber could have lived. So hopefully that same thing never has to happen to another child. The Jamison family deaths is a really weird mystery that happened whenever the Jamison family's car was discovered on October 8th of 2009. The family, who consisted of Bobby, Sherilyn, and their daughter Madison, had their truck found on the side of a rural road with their dog in the back seat, who was severely malnourished but alive. Whenever the Sheriff's Department of Latimer County, Oklahoma came to investigate the car, they found inside of it their IDs, their wallets, phones, and a briefcase containing $32,000 in cash. The more information that came out about this, the weirder it got. They went and reviewed the front door camera of the Jamison's family house that morning, and all you can see is the three family members in a sort of trance, moving what seems to be camping gear to the car from the house, along with the briefcase containing $32,000. There was a massive search effort that happened in the area around the truck, however, nothing was found. That was until 4 years later when a hunter discovered their bodies, which were now skeletonized, located only 3 miles away from where the truck was. Cause of death was never determined, and this raises more weird questions. If they were just lying on top of the ground dead, then why didn't the search parties that had combed over the area a ton ever find them? So were they killed somewhere else and then moved back there? And also, what were they doing in the first place? They drove the car in next to the woods, parked with their dog still inside of it, all got out, walked away, and died, while leaving the cash in the car. The leading theory is perhaps Bobby got himself involved with drugs, and this was a sort of means of paying off some debt he owed to a cartel of sorts. But it's also worth mentioning that their pastor said after the fact that Bobby had come to him saying that he heard spirits speaking to him after he began reading a satanic Bible and began to practice in the occult. That same pastor said that Bobby was struggling with it before he quit talking about it, and then this happened. So make of that what you will. Elaine Nix went missing on September 20th of 1999. Elaine would regularly drive to a payphone at a nearby gas station at night to talk to her boyfriend, who was a few counties over. There wasn't a phone at Elaine's house, so she would drive out to talk to him on a pretty regular basis. However, one night shortly after hanging up with her boyfriend on the phone, she was never seen again. The next day, her car was found parked next to the payphone, and in the surveillance footage of the nearby gas station, you can see in the corner what seems to be a truck pull up next to hers before driving away. 9 days later, 17 miles away, her body was found abandoned in the woods. No cause of death was determined, and the only confession that came forward was later proven to be a hoax. The leading theory is that whoever was in the truck kidnapped her before driving her away. However, there doesn't seem to be signs of a struggle or anything related, implying some to think that she willingly got in the truck with him, which, again, doesn't make sense, unless it was someone she maybe knew. Whatever the real solution, there have been no new leads since the case originally began, and it has gone cold. We are now on to Tier 3 and getting into some of the more gruesome stuff, beginning with the Hinterkaifeck massacre. On March 13th, 1922, it was discovered that a family of 6 was murdered at their home in Hinterkaifeck, Germany. However, not only that, but that the killer had lived for roughly 3 days with the bodies of his victims. Upon research of this, some of the more eerie clues started to come together. The family consisted of an elderly couple, their widowed daughter, and the daughter's 2 children, along with the maid who lived on the property. 6 months before the murders, the previous maid had quit, saying the house was haunted and she heard footsteps at night. A few days before the murders occurred, the grandfather had told his neighbor that he saw footprints in the snow leading from the woods to his barn. On top of that, he too reported hearing the same footsteps in the attic at night. While it can't be precisely determined, what it seems happened is that the killer led the father, grandfather, their daughter, and one of her children into the barn before murdering them with a pickaxe. The killer then walked into the house and killed the 2-year-old son along with the maid. What's really creepy is, like, the next day, kids came from the next farm over and peered in through the windows to see if anyone was home, didn't see anyone, and left, not knowing that the bodies were still there out in the barn and in the house. And this happened like 3 times. The mailman had come by and peeked in the window to see if anyone's home, but couldn't see anybody. It wasn't until a repairman came, who was hired by the grandfather a week earlier, that he walked into the barn, saw the bodies, and reported it to the police. More haunting details of the story came up, like whenever the police investigated the house, they found that there was food made and milk still set out, as if this person was just casually living around the bodies. Also, details like a vagrant who was passing by the region said that on one of the nights that would have been while the killer was still there and the family was murdered, a man who was covering his face and holding a lantern walked out to him while he was sitting at the front of the farm's property and told him to leave. It's a weird, very gruesome case that has never been solved and probably never will be given its age. Ida Lowry was murdered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on April 23rd of 1960. A man named Edwin Smith was driving through downtown Milwaukee when he heard a woman screaming from a nearby alley. When he ran to assist the woman, he found 76-year-old Ida Lowry in intense pain and bleeding a lot. Whenever he tried to move her, she began screaming, saying that she can't, so he then ran to a nearby phone where he called the police. Ida then died at the hospital. The only thing that she could get out through the pain was that the person who murdered her, quote, worked at the bridge. The more research that was done into Ida's life afterwards got more and more odd. Like, for example, her husband had died in 1950, to which afterwards she became very eccentric and doing things like dumpster diving. That, combined with things like she wasn't able to afford her $10 a week rent to the apartment that she lived in, would make you think that she was hard on her luck. However, during the investigation, they found $7,000 in her bank account that
Just
she
for
seemingly
inflation.
never touched. So either she was living some sort of weird double life, or she was simply an eccentric person who had money but wouldn't pay rent for some reason, who was murdered while in the alleys doing her dumpster diving thing. Who knows? The Axeman of New Orleans was a killer who killed...
If you guys are fans of, what is it? FX horror. Damn it! Now I'm skipping my name. Skipping it. Evan Peters plays in it. Hell of a good actor. American Horror Story. They highlighted this one on the season where they concentrated on the witches. So this, I found this to be rather, I had no idea about this until I had started listening more to other people about these icebergs, and found that to be quite odd.
Killed between May of 1918 and October of 1919. The majority of the victims were the impoverished Italians of the New Orleans area, leading many to think that it was possibly race motivated. While at the same time, it seems the targets appear to be women, with only men murdered if they so happened to be near a woman at the time, such as a husband, leading others to believe that perhaps it's misogynistic. All in all, the axe murder had a total of 12 victims, with every one of the killings being very brutal, as it was conducted with axe. However, very famously, on March the 13th, he wrote a letter to the police station saying that he was going to kill again that night at precisely 11:45. However, he really liked jazz music, so if a house was playing jazz music, he wouldn't kill them. So, that night, across all of New Orleans, every bar and house had its windows open playing jazz music as loud as it could. And sure enough, that night, the axe murderer didn't kill anyone. A massive manhunt was conducted that mostly resulted in police just beating up poor Italian people because, people were being murdered in the community, so they assumed it was someone in the community and not an attack on the community, so they attacked the community. And despite the relatively high victim count, the axe murderer has never been identified.
Okay, I'll stop it right there, and then we'll bust down part 2. Like I said, it's hour and 27 minutes. So yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying it so far and want to hear the rest of what's going on here. I know I am, because like I said, I watched about maybe half of it, somewhere around there. And yeah, this just really, has my attention. So, yeah, be on the lookout for part 2 coming up here as soon as I upload it. So until then, peeps, thank you so much for watching as always, and peace out.